So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome at this second webinar of a series of 3 in partnership with Sia Partners and Talentsoft. This series of 3 we have called the chances of the change, because although we are in a crisis currently and we're all in a situation that we've not lived before, we think it's very important to also look at the positive side and to still search for the positive signs. And that's the reason that we called it the chances in the change, because we want to also seize opportunities mostly in this case, the HR part. The role of HR is more important than ever, because in the end, human capital is the key of your business. And if we can manage our employees even at a distance, and if we can keep engaging them and use the knowledge of the crowds, then we can move forward as a company. But then you have to be connected to your people, to your colleagues. And the first webinar started with employee engagement. It's very important to be engaged, because if you don't feel the engagement of your employees, you cannot use their knowledge, you cannot use their experience, and it's going to be very difficult to connect with them. So this second webinar is about how to unlock the wisdom of the crowd. And we ended the last webinar with some very interesting questions about diversity. And diversity is a very large term, but very important, because diversity and bias is very influential on how you're going to deal with your people, how you're going to deal with each other. So if you are conscious of diversity, if you're conscious of your own bias, it's going to be much more easy to speak to your colleagues. So this is going to be an important topic, this webinar. Let me start by thanking our speakers. First of all, Jorn Fokkens, Senior HR and Change Manager of Sia Partners. And Sia Partners is a management consulting firm. They were founded 20 years ago in France and 10 years ago here in the Netherlands. And maybe good to say that they were one of the 7 companies that were invited by our government during the weekend Appeton. For those who haven't heard of them yet, our government, the Dutch government, has wanted to create an app for the COVID-19 crisis. And there were, I think, a couple of 100 companies that applied for this app, and they only invited 7 companies during the weekend, and Sia Partners was one of them. So that's really something to be proud of. I also would like to thank Nelly Verlinde from Talentsoft, digital HR specialist. And Talentsoft is the European leader in cloud-based talent management and learning software. And today, Nelly is going to be our facilitator. Jorn is going to give the presentation, but we would like it to be very interactive. I'm going to admit someone in the meantime. So please do not hesitate to ask any questions, to give your comments, because I can imagine that you also have a feeling with it, and certainly diversity touches everyone. So I think it's very important to share your knowledge, but also your ideas. I think the best way is to use the chat. But if there's anything you really would like to share at the moment, do not hesitate to unmute yourself. And if not, Nelly will make sure that, that you will keep an eye on the chat. We also have Stefan Twicht in our webinar today, also from Sia Partners. And Stefan just finished a research on gender diversity. So that's very interesting, because that's, of course, one of the many topics of diversity, but gender is also an important one, and Sia Partners just finished a research on it. I think that I'm going to give the floor to Jorn, and please, like I said, share your knowledge as well. So it's not only the knowledge of the crowd we're going to talk about, but also the knowledge of the participants we would like to have. And I'm going to give the floor to Jorn. And I would like to say enjoy this afternoon, and I wish you a lot of wisdom.
Thank you, Sylvie. Thank you very much. I hope everybody can hear me, and I am sharing my screen. So if you can see the introduction of this slide 1 to 5, then you're good. And if you can hear me, if not, please shout or raise your voice, and then we'll give it a start. So, as Sylvie eloquently said, it is about wisdom of the crowd, but it's so boring to do this without you, without using the wisdom of the participants as well to make the dialogue. Now, I can talk forever because there's lots to say, but we're really keen to hear you, and Nelly has been friendly enough to stop me and pause at stages where I talk too much. So I'm glad to have that help on board. So we want to talk about a couple of topics today that together hopefully help you unlock the wisdom of the crowd. In times of crisis, in times of change, true change, we need wisdom, we need creativity, we need our right brain of the hemisphere as much as we can. Diversity has been bridging the two webinars now, so we start off with that. And to start off with a nice metaphor, we thought we would bring along the party, to join the party. Now, diversity is being invited to the party as a person, as an individual. Diversity and inclusion. Inclusion means that you are belonging to the party and that you're fully in there and accepted. So being able to select the music and dance yourself in your own style, your own ways. And then a belonging. So when you actually feel that you belong, it means you're probably happy, you want to give the best that you have to your environment. So that metaphor is what we wanted to start off with in diversity.
Yes, I think, Jorn, I'm going to interrupt you already here before you continue, because I think what could be interesting is to see what we define as diversity, and it would be interesting to get a few different opinions in here. So I invite everybody warmly to share their view on what diversity is with us.
Excellent idea. Who has some thoughts about diversity? What is diversity for you? You can use the chat, you can unmute yourself quickly and go back on mute again, just to shout a couple of words or sentences that you think is all about diversity. Anybody? Are we seeing some in the chat, perhaps? Some responses?
Not yet.
Come on, guys. It's important to have you with us. Let's break the ice.
There are coming some different in the chats.
Coming something in this chat. So I see that diversity means different cultures, of course, which is a good one. And then I see diversity of nationality, gender, origin, background, also all true. And then an interesting one, which is equal chances for everyone. Again, an equal representation of society. So Jorn, I'm not sure if you can work with this.
I can definitely work with it. All good. So all good answers, and probably there are even a lot more.
There's also sexual orientation, culture coming in, different expectations. Perfect. So now I won't interrupt you anymore.
No, it's good, and I keep raising those beautiful remarks because they all add up to an entire journey of diversity. But meanwhile, we want to go to the next slide, where Stefan and I have put together a couple of your remarks. It's vast. We're not going to dive deep in it, but we believe that diversity is a huge spectrum from which we only touch now gently on gender, a bit on sexual orientation, and not that much more at the moment. So what we want to say with this slide is that diversity is actually just beginning because it is vast. If you want to become really fully diverse, then it is all about your individual, your personality coming first, with respect where you come from, what your orientation is, age, and whatever is in here. So it's a long journey, and we believe that this crisis is actually bringing this journey forward much faster. Now, we're not going to go in deep dive in all of that, but we have taken out a couple of puzzle pieces to say that we definitely know they would add to our innovative capacity. So in this nice little picture, we think that your personality, your cultural background, your age diversity, your some other backgrounds in this is actually helping innovation and innovative capacity. Because when you are fully yourself and you're happy and you are fully accepted, we think your creativity and the best that you have is something that you can give because you feel accepted and respected from that. So that diversity bridge is being built, and it is being built at foundational steps, and we want to increase that journey over time. So another slide is a little bit on acceptance of diversity. This is a bit focused on the LGBT. So when in Rome, do as the Romans do. So you mean, will you adapt? But there's also companies and environments that are almost promoting it, and there's embassies, so you're safe here, and even advocating it loudly, and then you're a pioneer and a front runner. So a couple of things on diversity and acceptance of it. The next chapter is on bias, because it is our own bias that actually keep diversity in its niche, or still in its child's shoes, if you will. So to help bring a more diverse workforce, we need to first understand what our own bias is. And we all have biases. One has maybe more bias than others, but becoming conscious of it is where it actually starts, because only then you start to respect other people's view, mindset, or backgrounds. And we actually did this study, and Stefan is a front runner in doing this study. So perhaps if I can invite Stefan to talk a bit about this slide and maybe the next, because he knows exactly what he found. Are you happy to, Stefan, to join in this one, or would you prefer the next one?
I can join in on this one. So what we see is in an employee's life cycle, you see that there are different stages where we encounter biases. So when you attract or recruit someone, biases might arise on that field. During the onboarding, there might be biases. People are biased towards a certain person. And during the support and development, there are biases. We like someone more than someone else, for instance, so that one gets more development. Then we have the engagement and perform. Also there, that bias might arise. And during promotion and sustain, there's also a possibility that there is a bias. And if you look at this whole cycle, then we have the leave part. And when you see biases are found in nearly all these stages, and then they contribute to a lack of engagement, development, and might negatively influence retention, causing people to leave the company because they don't see they have equal chances. If you can go to the next slide.
Yeah.
So what we also see, there are 4 pieces that we can use to reduce biases. So first of all, you need to create awareness. If you want to tackle a bias, make sure that the people in your company or that you are aware of the biases. Everybody has a bias. You can always test this on Harvard has a very good test for this, the implicit bias test. You'll see there's always a slight bias in people. And you need support from the company. People from top down, but also bottom up, need to come together and accept that there is a bias and they want to tackle that. And then we have the processes, and we need to change these processes. Is there a bias in the process somewhere? Like for instance, in the employee life cycle, during recruitment, we need to tackle that. And then we can also bring in AI. With AI solutions, they might reduce the bias, but that only works if this whole puzzle fits together, because you need, with AI, it's still based on humans, on processes and on how humans are able to, then the computer is being automated, but the process might already be biased. So if you automate that bias into your AI, yeah, you keep on getting the bias and you can't get it out. So this whole puzzle needs to fit together.
Any questions? Yes.
If I may add, indeed, Stefan, I think that's an important note here, that you can, of course, now find fantastic AI solutions to create a more bias-free, no, let's say a less biased process. But indeed, if the data that you use for these tools has bias in it, then of course, yeah, we still don't get a process that has less bias in it. So I think that was a good addition.
Excellent. And do interrupt us if there's interesting remarks or questions from the audience. And otherwise we go to the next one, Stefan.
Yeah, we did have one question, which is already more or less has been replied, but still the question was, I think it's still a good question. Can people be completely bias free?
Well, so my personal view is that that would be almost impossible because of your own background. However, I think you already are a front runner when you are as conscious as can be. And whether you're totally bias free, I really don't know. I think that would be almost like a utopia, because at some point, at some educational background or whatever background, you carry some of those biases in. As long as you are aware of them, you can tackle them, and then still that's a try. So conscious is one step, but being able to say that I'm not biased any longer is quite a step. It is also okay to be a bit biased as long as you're conscious of them, and as long as you try to mitigate it as best as possible and try to ask feedback, you know, how am I doing on those biases? So having that dialogue ongoing is already a big step forward. That would be my 10 cents to that one.
Yeah, if you look back to the beginning, early humans, if you look at the tribes, they also had biases because they valued someone from their own tribe more than someone from another tribe. There we already see the biases coming in evolution.
Mm-hmm. Good. So shall we go to the next one where your real research entered, Stefan?
Yeah. So what we did is that we looked at biases in the employee lifecycle, but then mainly in the first part during recruitment and hiring. So if you look at job ads, there are certain researches that say if you use certain words in your job ad, that might be masculine coded words or feminine coded words, these have an influence on how diverse your talent pool is that's going to be attracted by your job ad. So a lot of behavioral studies show that if you use masculine words, that they are less appealing to female applicants or more diverse applicants. And using mainly feminine coded words results in a more diverse pool, because also the masculine talent will also apply for the job. So we make a distinction between these two, masculine coded and feminine coded. So masculine is more associated with a masculine environment and feminine more with a feminine environment. The masculine coded words are mainly aimed at your personality traits. So you can also see you are this, you are that in job ad, whereas the feminines are more added to behavior. So you're able to, you can do this. The masculine words also perceived as harsh words, harder words, where the feminine more the nourishing words, softer. Studies show that masculine words are appealing to males, but females are less hesitant because they look at the whole job ad and scan it, and they want to comply to all the rules in the job ad. Well, if you use feminine coded words, that does not have an influence or a slightly influence on how many males will apply to the job, but you will get a more diverse pool of people. An example for this is if you look at the masculine coded language, that is you are result driven. That's associated as more harsh and therefore masculine, but you can rewrite this more neutral or feminine by stating you are able to achieve results. So,
you're good. And so wanted to add is, I love the banks that all say now that we need customer first and we need more inclusiveness, and when they're hiring, and lots of times their ads were pretty masculine. So you need to understand and get be aware of how you describe your ad and what you need, because that will attract the right kind of person. So it is important to become conscious again of this, even in the language and the wording you use.
Yes, and in that regard, we've got an interesting question as well, because if we speak about the language, I can imagine that it's not just the language in job ads, but also the language you use as a company in general, right? So the question that we have is, beyond job ads, does your employer branding play a role in attracting diverse candidates?
I would say absolutely, but Stefan, perhaps you'd like to answer it?
Yes, I agree. Employee branding also plays a role in attracting a diverse talent. Because if you see some companies post a code of conduct on their website about diversity, only having that statement already can mean a lot for diverse talent, that they feel accepted at the company. But be wary that because with the branding, and if you state that you are diverse, be wary that you're not being labeled as pink washing, for instance. Oh, you say yes, PT rights, but you're not doing anything with it. Or the same with environment nowadays, greenwashing. Companies that just lift on the hype.
So I would even go as far as to say that it should be in your entire corporate communication, this consciousness, because you want to actually be who you say you are. And that starts at going outside, marketing, but then your job ads, but also internal communications, of course. We're all say we can do it and we power and blah, blah, blah. Then it's very masculine. But if
you also see this nowadays with the COVID-19 situation. Some companies just publish hard numbers. Oh, we're doing good, we're doing good. And other companies really invest in their employees by using more nourishing way of working. How are you? What are you doing? We're proud of you. That also shows a difference.
Excellent. Is that covers that the bias stuff? And then we're gonna go for the next slide. Okay.
Yeah. Jorn, we had a raised hand.
Yes. Tell me.
Noemi?
This is
I think Noemi.
Yeah, that's me. Sorry, I didn't write it down. I didn't know how to say it in only few words. My question is how can you be more neutral if you're doing like an ad such in a language as in French? Because, for example, French adjectives are all feminine or masculine, and then it will be more directed to maybe men will be more like, I don't know how to say that, but for example, in English, happy is just happy. In French, it will be two different words according if it's for feminine person or masculine person. Do you know what I mean?
I know what you mean, and I think we mainly focused on English and Dutch, Stefan.
Yes, we focused in this one on Dutch.
Not really the French language, so that would be interesting to find out what the wording more masculine and more feminine is in French language. And because I understand, of course, that some languages are, by default, depending on from how you describe it. But if you would make it a bit neutral, so we're not looking for a man or a woman, but for a person, how would the wording look like then? So that's an interesting view. I don't know in French exactly what it's going to be like. So we need to actually start defining and tagging the French language and seeing what's masculine and what's feminine and what's the right balance there.
Okay, thank you.
Would be a nice next research.
You also see this, for instance, if you compare Germany with Spain and use the word bridge. In Germany, the word bridge is associated with elegant, connecting, more feminine, whereas in Spain, it's strict, hard, firm, and more associated with masculine environments. If you put an English job ad and you say, we're looking for someone to build a bridge, that can also be interpreted differently by people, different cultures.
So language, culture, it all comes together, and this is a vast journey to become conscious of. Here are some last industries where Stefan found which industries are a bit more feminine coded and which industries are a bit more masculine coded.
And so we see here the top 5 of each, but also nice to state that we found that, well, not particularly the whole 9, but we showed that the whole, almost 2/3 of the industries we researched were masculine coded in language. There's only a small fraction that is feminine coded. There were 6 industries out of the 18. And you also see a difference in our study that you use feminine coded words or not at all, because there's a large gap between the scores. While masculine coded job ads and industries, they go down, follow a trend, but then suddenly it stops and you're either feminine or not.
So this study has been published. It's been in the news last week, I think, Stefan. And if there's more interest in this topic, please do reach out to Stefan and myself, and how we can further evolve this, if you will. Any questions, Nelly, in the meantime, on this topic before we move on?
No questions. We just have one practical tip actually regarding the job ads in the French language, which can, I think, already be of help, and that is basically you can use things like le/la, so the masculine and the feminine, to show that you include everybody. So that was one tip coming from the chat.
Excellent. Thank you for that.
Welcome.
Super. All right.
And then I think we can move on to remote work well-being, Jorn, because this is also a very important element when it comes to being able to unlock the wisdom of the crowd. And I'd like to start with a few recent stats on the impact of remote work on employees. So obviously a lot of people, they are now working from home due to the COVID-19 situation. So there have been several surveys, and when we look at the survey that has been done in the Netherlands, 70%, so that is 70, of Dutch employees, they endure stress and tension while working remotely due to the corona measures. More than 50% of the employees surveyed have gloomy or negative thoughts, which I personally thought was quite shocking, because that's 1 in 2 people. And then 10% of people has severe anxiety. Now we can look to our neighbors in the south for a few more stats. In Belgium, there are 32% of employees, so a little over 1/3. They find it difficult to concentrate at the moment, and 30%, so 1 in 3 people, have a form of sleep deprivation. And 42% of them, they feel pressure. So these are not great stats. I think now I also understand why here in the Netherlands we have this radio commercial that is telling people who have gloomy thoughts or feel they need to speak to someone that there's actually a special phone number that they can call. So I think this all emphasizes once more the importance of remote work well-being, and especially if you want people to be able to bring their best selves to work and to be able to share their wisdom. So, Jorn, I think this is my intro for you.
Thank you very much, Nelly. Indeed, the results are stunning. So we are in a world where we need to work remote. It's probably here to stay, and it is interesting to see that it still also takes work to care for your well-being in a remote situation. So in the Netherlands, workplace well-being was starting to get on the radar. However, now we have to talk about almost home office well-being, where your work environment is now probably your home, and your well-being is equally important to help the contribution. So last webinar we talked about engagement and virtual engagement. Now we also want to add well-being. We crafted this slide to give you a sort of a first glimpse on what we think is less and less visible. So we always have an iceberg, the typical iceberg on the left side where there is visible behavior and some, tangible agreements or relationships where you can see that, you can hear it, you can spot it, you're involved. And then, of course, there's always something under the iceberg that we are sometimes conscious of, sometimes not. Well-being probably always being one of them. However, you could still spot in the office when somebody is very absent or not feeling well, etc. Now that gets covered in this new crisis where we need to work from home and are less visible. Basically, the iceberg is going more and more under the water. So that's a very general statement. Again, here it is the idea to become conscious of that, the fact that you see less of an employee, whereas you still need to have this employee in your employee workforce fully on board, especially when we want to leverage their knowledge, their creativity, their innovativity, their ideas. So without engagement, there is also no attention for well-being. So it's a stepstone approach. But the well-being is becoming more important because in your home office, you have so much other things to take care of. You're involved maybe with distraction, with loneliness. You're involved maybe with children walking around or any other kind of distraction, which is part of you as a person. So that is an extra invisible stuff that we need to sort of try to unlock as well. So we crafted this one. I think we showed it last time very briefly when we talked about virtual engagement. This time we'd like to go a bit more deeper in what we mean with remote well-being. So we distinguish between the physical well-being, so that's the body, just basic health, but there's also emotional and mental well-being, and we've got spiritual well-being, and of course, without being digital savvy, then there's also that kind of well-being to feel left out. So there's a couple of components how we want to sort of chop up this well-being stuff in the home office. And there's some stressors that Nelly already pointed out in the researches that are on the left side with distractions, isolation, not enough focus, work-life balance is being disturbed. I hear people getting up and starting to sit behind their computer, and when it's time to go to bed, they put the computer down. So what does it mean for your work-life balance, etc., etc. And what we did is we tried to tackle a couple of these items with some help. So what could we do? What resources do you have to tackle these stressors and to start asking for them? So we have...
So Johan, can I just interrupt you for a second?
Yes,
because
please.
this is just a simple curiosity from my part. I'm wondering if anyone in the audience has some ideas about how we could improve, without looking to the slide, yes.
Yes. Yes.
If you have any ideas about how we could improve well-being while people are working remotely, because I think this is a very current topic. I also think it is a big challenge and will become an even bigger challenge for companies because as many people are hardly leaving the house, this might not only cause challenges on a mental level, because yes, people might face loneliness, or they might also miss, of course, the social contact with their colleagues, but there's also a physical part, because people might not exercise as much as they used to because they are in the house the whole day, and also they might be confined still. So I'm actually quite curious what the ideas are about improving remote well-being, if there are any ideas at all.
Yeah, that's very curious. And please, if you want to unmute yourself to have a talk, please do so, or use the chat. Keen to hear your voice.
Yeah, this is a bit of a brainstorm, like let's say a crowd brainstorm almost, because this is new territory in a way, although remote work already existed before, but not in this extent. So I see here already having rituals at a fixed time. I think that is definitely a good one, so that you try to create structure. also being able to follow your own rhythm, which I think makes sense because everybody, of course, has their own home constraints to deal with. Some people might be homeschooling still, for example, right now. So yes, I think so. Between having fixed rituals and having flexibility, it's about finding that balance. I'm not sure, Jorn, if you have any ideas.
No, these are really good ideas. And again, I would, there's advantages. We are looking at the chances in the change. So to make your own work rhythms, I really like that. But to be seen as a full person, where the camera is on your home office, where you are more seen in your own diversity, is a chance. Huh? So to not hide from who you really are, what you have to bring. But to also make sure you make some structure where you take your breaks, where you put your own alarm clock saying, we have to stop now and have a break, get some air, bring some good food. Yes, Nelly?
Sorry about that. I actually have a really good one here in the chat, which is actually very simple, but it's so simple that you could forget about it. But I think this may be the basis, and it is asking questions about well-being, which I think is definitely the place to start. If you ask people how are you and how are you really doing, so not just how are you and move on to the next question, but ask people how they are really doing, if they're well, if their families are well, if they're healthy. So I think that's actually a really good one.
It's really good, and I would like to add to ask the question and listen with interest.
I get a really nice, a really good one. Cycling from home to home in the morning.
Good. You can even do that. And there's actually people that do take a walk before starting. It is already daily practice.
Yeah. But I think this is important, not just for the physical exercise, but also I heard people say that, when they were commuting to and from work, for them, that was also the break that they needed mentally when they went from work to home, because it was a time, well, I don't know, in the public transport or in a car or cycling. But anyway, it was a time to switch off and to go, into home mode, so to speak.
Absolutely. And what we feel is that the opportunity is that the relationships can, rather than that they deteriorate, could be more extended. So to ask the question, how are you and how are you really, not only talk about health, but also mental health, about your emotion. And as leaders, to really listen to how people really are, you get to know each other probably better. But it starts with that first step, which is engaging, to be connected among colleagues, with your leaders and managers, with other people, to be connected and to ask, how are you really doing? And this is a new era, also a new terrain to explore, because it was, until now, it was more business-like, business focused. You are at home, you do who you really are, and at the business, you put on the mask and you are this colleague. It starts to deteriorate. Those barriers are no longer there. You are this person, you are a diverse person, and you bring what you have as long as you feel safe. And to feel safe, you need to be heard, you need to be seen, and to be accepted in who you are. So that's the chance. And if you forget about those relationships and you start to isolate yourself, but also you are not being asked or connected to, then that's the risk that we're seeing. And I believe that the better we do this connection, and the better we ask how you really are and what can we do to improve whatever issue you have, also on a personal level, the better you feel in contributing to whatever company or project you are on.
Yeah, I think perhaps we can now take a look at your slides to see what we missed.
Yeah. So here's just a couple of suggestions. So it's very basic, virtual social engagements. This is the engagement that we talked about as a stepping stone, where you can tackle this isolation and tackle the feeling not belonging or having some interpersonal challenges. So this is where you can see on the bottom the icons of the mental well-being and the emotional well-being. Digital leadership as a second step is going to be more important. This is actually the topic we're going to dive a little bit more into, because we think that's increasingly important. Leadership, for that matter, as a general one, but also to be able as a leader to digitally connect, use all the tools that are out there to connect and ask the right questions and practice listening skills, etc. So digital leadership to help understand how you both think, how to access the right information, and to increase that sense of belonging, like you matter, and ask for that. So that's a little bit on digital leadership, and we can talk lots about that. But also to support with good virtual check-ins and check-outs. Also there, how are you? What have you taken away from this conversation? Is there anything else we can do? How would you leave this conversation again? So to come out of your social isolation. Also to ask those questions. Do you feel isolated? Yes or no? Because if that is structural, we need to maybe do something. We need to maybe organize what we do at Sia Partners, for instance, or every Friday there, or every other Friday, there's a virtual pub quiz or a social virtual drinks and chit chat. So it is connecting again. Work-life balance is also a good one to check on, and whether people maybe need some help on maybe mindfulness practice or some other mental exercises. So we've got almost a toolkit, not really in this slide, to help on that kind of well-being. And then also the physical workspace, how to improve that. So if you're home and you are not really meant to set up a home office there because you were always working in the office, and now all of a sudden you need to sit behind a desk and a chair that is really lousy for your back or for whatever ergodynamics, it needs to be tackled. So it also is good to ask a person if you have the right equipment there, and maybe you can, as a employer, sponsor a bit that they get the right stuff in their home office, so that they take care of their health. So this is just some highlights on how to tackle well-being, which is now remote, which is now less visible, but equally important to address. So any reactions to that one? Please feel free.
Not yet, Jorn, I don't think. Good. And also timing-wise, I do feel that we need to move on.
We move on.
So this brings us to cross-cultural collaboration. And if I'm not mistaken, Jorn, we are going back to another iceberg, right?
Here it is, Nelly. You were spot on. We use the same kind of iceberg to also look at a bit of cultural diversity. Why cultural diversity? Why you take that out? Because diversity is big, but culturally there are many aspects that help you or deprive you of proper collaboration. So last time somebody in the webinar also talked about the international collaboration, and especially in the word international comes the word cultural diversity. So even though you can hear somebody talking a different language or an accent, or you could maybe even see somebody in different clothing or eating different food traditions, there is lots that we can't see, which are equally important. So everything under the water here, which includes biases or other, sense of humor or ethics, work ethics, cultural ethics, family roles, and other concepts are interesting. Why do we tackle this? Why do we want to dive into that? Because of the collaboration and the international collaboration. And we have one or two slides on that one. Hofstede, of course, is a very well-known person that dived into the cultural differences. We took out, based on his model, just 2 countries, because we are in the chamber of French chamber. So we thought we take out French and Dutch culture. And you can see that there are differences there and somewhere where we are a little bit more equal. So it is a model, not the model. It's a model in understanding the different cultures on nationalities. It doesn't have to say that all the Dutch and all the French are the same, because also we have our multicultural environment in Holland, and the French have a lot of different cultures. But in general, this is how you can look at nationalities, where the French and the Dutch, for instance, have a very different aspect to power distance. The French are much more in favor of a good power distance, so they like more power. The Dutch are a little bit less so. So they have a smaller power distance. Masculinity, we just talked about it, masculinity, femininity. In the middle, we're both a little bit more on the feminine side, but the Dutch are even more feminine in general. And then I like kind of the indulgence in the last part, where indulgence stands for if you can let go and enjoy yourself. The French tend to say we are a bit reluctant to let ourselves go, and the Dutch, when they're sort of feel that there's a relief or a party to celebrate, we go wild. And that's where we have probably most festivals ever that are all on hold now. So the Dutch must be really sad with festival outages, etc. But this is just one way of looking at it. The other slide that we have on collaborating is a little bit more on also different aspects, where we have some Asian countries, China and Japan. We have the Netherlands and France, and we have the USA in there. Now, it's not the idea to talk through them all, but it's just to give you an understanding that if you take those nationalities and put them on the line on communicating or leading, and how you do that, where it's more egalitarian or less, or where it's more top-down or less, where it's more with regards to time. So you see those differences. You see where France and Holland are more close together with regards to giving feedback, for instance, but where they're pretty much separate, which is, for instance, in the persuading on the last one. And you can see where there is on the right hand side the Asian countries more dominant. Whereas one thing that surprised me very much, that in deciding that Japan is very much on the consensual side, that was a surprise for me. But then I thought, oh, wait a minute, Japan, that is the one where Toyota invented the Kaizen model, where every other person could stop the conveyor belt and say, I have a better idea. And maybe that is a little bit interesting, how that Japan, even they may be more hierarchical, are still consensual on that side. So it's interesting to see those perspectives. What is the red thread again? It is becoming conscious of those differences in order to collaborate better and better and learn from each other. If you know it from me and I know it from you, we may meet each other in the middle, or we may say, in this context, we may lean a little bit more towards you, and the other context is maybe better to lean towards the other. It is respecting one another and collaborating. But let me pause here.
Yes, I had one thing I'd like to add here, but we're really getting short in time, so I'm going to be very brief. But I think a really nice one that I heard from a podcast where a CEO of a fully distributed organization and that worked with many different people from many different cultures said was one of their rules was API, and API usually stands for, I'm not really sure, but something in the coding, I believe, something technical, but they say that API for them stands for assume positive intent. And I thought about it a few times afterwards, and I think it's a really good one. If you always assume positive intent when you're talking to someone, whether it's a colleague from the same country or a different country or whatsoever, if you assume that that person has a positive intent and doesn't mean anything by it, especially if it's via a chat or email, I think that's a good one to keep in mind. Anyway, moving on, I think.
Moving on, let's see, we are almost going in the last building block, so let's see if we can rush through that. Because the fourth building block in unlocking the wisdom of the crowd is what we think that we should use data and data-driven tooling a lot more. Now, not to go into techniques or a lot of details, but we do think that we are at the stage in the world where artificial intelligence data is rich, not to take over, but to equip and enable us to be using our right brain hemisphere much more. We are in a world now that we need flexibility. We need effective organizational capacity to address this crisis, to answer this crisis. So we need the human-only work. We need to catalyze that. And AI and data is there to help us. So to not be afraid of what it takes over, but to help us facilitate so we can actually start using that creativity. And there's lots of tools out there in the market that can help you there. And one of the, let's say, outlooks that I'd like to share is when you use data-driven tooling well, with more facts, more concretizing objects, using the wisdom of the crowd also with data, not using surveys, but actually focusing on facts, what is in place and what is your ambition rather than opinions. To have a focus, a dedicated focus. Those are items that AI can facilitate for us. Because when we do, the AI helps us to connect to each other without the bias, or at least less bias, depends on how you set it up, with more interesting data points on this person on this side of the world can best connect with that person on this topic. Or the ambition that I want to have is actually already crafted in the other side of the world, so I will connect. And it is digital leadership that can enable and facilitate it much more. So that's why we think in the traditional approach in understanding where we are in a company is outdated. So we do surveys, we try to define a problem, we do interviews, long time and schedule appointments, and then we make a report and we present it in a PowerPoint and nothing happens. Automated tools with data-driven solutions is easier once you set it up. You pick the right questions, you click easily, there's action, you get maybe your instant results, dashboards, it's real time, the connection points are clear, so it helps people and enables people to connect more, to be more creative, to work together on stuff faster. So what we have said here is the virtual engagement and well-being will be increased when you enable it with data-driven tooling. You can adopt and personalize data, so even in your personal dashboards, to represent the voice of the employees. It all goes a lot faster, and when you do that well, it actually helps the workforce to become smart in mobilization, and you will probably be having better motivation, your knowledge will increase, and your collaboration will increase. And it results in connecting to each other in suggested buddy maps, as we have an example here. So we use one or two toolings around this area, but there's much more, and it's just to say that use the technology to the best of your abilities as a fourth building block in unlocking the wisdom of the crowd. So we wanted to end, yes, Nelly, this is the last slide.
No, I was going to say that was very well said, Jorn, indeed, because it is the fourth building block, and that brings us to this last slide. So I'll leave you to that.
Yeah, last slide, just to wrap up. We think we live in a time frame where we want to unlock the wisdom of the crowd, because we need the creativity, we need to innovate, and we need to do it rapidly, and we have to do that in a virtual world, a remote world. We think diversity is key, so to mature your diversity in that journey and constantly improve that. We think we need to do that with motivation, so how to virtually engage employees all the time. We think that is best done when your well-being in your home office is as best as it can be with the right attention, where digital leadership or leadership with a digital touch can bring this closer to the individual and make those connections and be very much a human leader, asking how you are really are doing and what can we do to even improve where some things go. And then when you use the smart tooling to support all of that, we believe that the innovative capacity is increasing. And when that is all balanced and well, we think there is a tremendous job for leadership to do that, but also the potential, the chance that we see the change to innovate is there, and we need to seize the opportunity. So with that, I'd like to hand it back. We're a little bit over time, but happy to answer any last questions if you want to stick around. Maybe.
Thank you very much, Jorn.
Yes.
So are there any questions?
Or also suggestions to take on board for our next webinar is also good.
Because the next webinar will be about digital leadership, we have to, so maybe indeed there are some ideas from you that you would like to highlight next time.
And any response about this webinar is also good, whether it helped you or not, or confused you. Any response is helpful for us.
Any questions? If not, I'm gonna wrap up, I think. Thank you very much for all of you. Well, thank you very much, Jorn, Nelly, and Stefan, for sharing your knowledge with us. I learned a lot. I think it's such an interesting topic because diversity and bias, it's so interesting to speak about it. And indeed, the consciousness is important. I was the one asking the question, can you be completely bias-free? I always hope I can, but somehow you also know that there's always some prejudice that you have. But indeed, being conscious of it and having a very diverse team brings you further, I think, as a company. So if you work well with the diversity, I mean, it's such a richness to be international, to have an intercultural, but not only cultural diversity, but all kinds of diversity in your team. It brings so much different ideas and point of views. So thank you very much. I could talk about this for ages still, this whole topic. Thank you very much. Thank you to all participants. And I'm looking forward to the next webinar of about digital leadership. Thank you very much.
Thank you also. And if you have any last comments, do send them on or later on, because it's always useful. Thank you for listening and thank you for staying with us.